Hello, everyone, and welcome to another bonus episode of the Stephen King podcast. This is bonus episode 21, and I have with me today writer MJ Preston. And MJ, what genres do you write in?
Write in thriller and fiction.
Okay, and we're really close to one another. We're both up in the Edmonton, Alberta area, so you're the closest interview I've done, even though we're still doing it virtually, and we would have had to do it anyhow, given this current conditions of social distancing.
Yeah, that's right. Otherwise, I could have come over to your house and we could just sat down in a room and talked.
That's right. Okay, so why don't you tell us a little about your current work and just a brief synopsis of what it's all about?
Sure. My current work is a series called the HIGHWAYMAN series, and I've written 2 books. And the reason I'm actually talking about 2 books is because the 2 books envelop one story. And basically, it is a police procedural thriller, and it's about the FBI chasing a serial killer, and who wants to be, by the way, the greatest serial killer of all time, or certainly he wants to be the most prolific. So that's my latest work. I am, as you said, from Canada, just like you. And I've been writing pretty much my whole life, but I got into the gig of writing novels back in about 2011.
Okay. And let's dive into that a little bit. What prompted you to start writing at that time?
I guess it must be because I slowed down in my life. I actually penned half of my first novel back in the 80s when I was in the military. And because I was so busy, I was a family man and I was in the Canadian military, so we were off on exercise, gone from home all the time. I couldn't finish it at that time, just there were other commitments. And then back in 2010, about halfway through, I found a half-written manuscript sitting in a box, and I thought, wow, maybe I should take a kick at finishing this. Now, I should tell you something. It's not in all that time, I was still writing. I just wasn't writing longer fiction. I wasn't writing novels. I wrote short stories, and I was, doing military reportage. I wrote film reviews and stuff like that. Like, I was always writing, but I kind of abandoned the idea of publishing a novel. And then I found this manuscript, and I thought I should give it a kick. And that's what I did. I set out to do that, and I published it in the latter part of 2011.
Very interesting. So let's talk about a little bit then about your desire to write. Were you a reader your whole life as well, or? Yeah,
I would say so. I mean, look, since I was a little kid, I was the one always staring out the window. So I wrote a lot of stories and did some pretty bad illustrations to go with the stories.
Okay.
And so, yeah, I was always in that. And of course, yes, I like to read. I was, I'm just a voracious film watcher. I can probably quote all sorts of films to you that I watch. I know a lot of people are like, how do you know that? Well, because I love that stuff.
Right.
It got me in a lot of trouble at school because, like I said, I was always daydreaming, and my marks weren't all that hot, and math is certainly not my high point.
Right.
But the writing part of it, I dug it because you could go into this world where you basically everything around you just evaporates and you're focused in on the story. So when I was reading, I felt myself disappear into those worlds. And when I started writing, I also felt myself, and I just thought it was a cool medium to be into.
Sure. Okay. So, what are your top favorite authors?
That's a moving target. I mean, I started out, I was like a lot of people, I was a huge Stephen King fan back in the 70s and the 80s. And I still like Mr. King. He's a hell of a writer. But of course, Tom Clancy, I'm all over the place when I'm not just focused in on horror.
Right.
Robert R. McCammon is probably one of my favorite authors from that era as well.
Right.
But I also like John Sandford, Michael Connelly. And then those would be for pleasure, those would be the guys I read. But, I'm pretty open. If a book gets in front of me and it catches my eye and grabs me in the first few chapters, I'm in, no matter who they are or where they're from. Right. I like indie writers too.
Okay. In terms of your writing craft, did you take any traditional formal education for writing?
I did not. No. I mean, I got a general education, high school.
Right.
But I don't have an MFA or anything like that. And that's weird, because you feel kind of, oh, geez, maybe I should have gone to school for this, right?
Yeah.
I think I'm still learning, but I think that somebody once said, because I actually brought this up once, and I said, you know what, I don't have a Master of Fine Arts for writing, so, should I feel angsty around all these other people that are, university educated and stuff like that?
Right.
And writing's a craft like carving or anything else. I mean, you have to understand words and you have to understand language, but the whole idea is to mold a story to give to somebody that they're going to want to read it, and or especially a novel or something like that. So, you can be a layman like me, and that's not what I am, is I've always just kind of learned as I went. I mean, not to say that I didn't pay attention in English, I did.
Sure.
but I just didn't go on. I originally wanted to become a journalist.
Okay.
And I wanted to go off and be a reporter and whatnot. But just the times and everything didn't work out. And I had a young family to take care of. And that's how I ended up in the military. But I even then, like I say, doing that, I wrote military reportage through my life. So.
Okay. Did you, or have you, since you became serious about writing, have you tried to supplement it by taking any sort of creative writing courses or anything like that? Or
well, something that I did was I started frequenting writing forums and interacting. And of course, I know quite a few writers too, so we talk about the craft and that.
Yep.
And I think one of the biggest things that especially an aspiring writer can learn to improve their craft is we all read books for pleasure.
Yep.
But if you start once in a while, if you go back to a book that you've read before, so you don't wreck it by reading it for mechanics, go in and actually, I have a tendency to process how somebody writes, their particular style and all like that.
Right.
So I think that, I mean, I love to, but I just don't have time to go on a course.
Right.
And I hate to, oh my God, he doesn't have time to do an English course.
Yeah. Well, a big part of writing is just the simple truth. It's just getting your butt in the chair and doing it. And if you've got that handled, which you obviously must, since you've written a couple of books, so that's 95% of the battle, really. Everything else just adds to your craft in terms of technique and whatnot.
Well, certainly. I mean, you have to have your stuff together, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
Because it's never going to see an editor. If you submit it to somebody and it's a mess, they're gonna send it back. But thank God for editors too, because they keep you on the straight and narrow.
That's right. So then I'm curious about your writing process. You've how many books do you have altogether?
I've written 4 novels. I'm working on
okay. So has your process evolved over the course of these 4 novels?
It has. Initially, with my first novel, I think I did about 35 drafts on it before I let it go. Yeah, I think so. I generally get up early in the morning. That's when I start, is sometimes 5 o'clock in the morning when nobody's awake and it's just me. Turn off all social media, anything that's going to be possibly a distraction. I do like to write music, so I'll put something on, Spotify or whatever.
Yep.
And then I just get down to work. And my process is that with that first draft is I don't get all hung up on it being absolutely perfect. Some people are, well, we got to do this page and I'm going to go back and do clean it all up and then carry on to the next page. I just run for the finish line. So if my aim is a chapter that day, I run and get that done as fast as possible.
Okay.
And I do it, and that way I've just got this momentum going all the time because there's going to be lots of time to go back and clean up the disastrous mess that you left in your wake of thinking that you were a genius getting to the finish line.
Yeah.
So that's generally what I do. Is I do that. I probably bang off about a chapter a week after it goes through a number of drafts. And then I'm lucky enough that I've got a research assistant, particularly with the series that I'm working with right now.
Oh, nice.
There's a lot of research involved. So, and she doubles as my beta reader. And as a true confession, she came in as a beta reader and ended up being a research assistant.
Cool.
Because she was so good at what she did. And so I sent her a chapter and she'll send it back what she thinks and blah, blah, blah. And then we get to that first draft. And then after the first draft, it's again and again and again. And, you're looking for plot holes. You're looking for all the other stuff that comes along that absolutely bores the hell out of a reader.
Right.
But the idea is, we go through a number of drafts to try and get it where it's ready to hand over to a publisher, and then whether they're going to like it or not.
Right.
And that's generally it. I don't outline, or I'm what do they call it, a pantster. I fly by the seat of my pants.
Right.
I don't have any set agenda when I get into it. I just follow the story where it goes. And usually about halfway through, I get an idea how it's going to end. Okay. But I don't plot or outline at all.
Okay, that's interesting. I was going to ask you if you were a plotter or a pantser, and you already answered that for me. So then let's talk about because you're working on a series of 4 books, how are you handling the overall arcing plot of this series if you are a pantser?
Okay, that's a funny question. Okay, but first I'll just correct you. My first two books were standalone novels.
Yeah.
So I did a straight up horror novel called The Equinox. After that, I wrote a horror sci-fi called Acadia Event.
Mm-hmm.
Which was inspired by my time as an ice road trucker, because I was an ice road trucker from 2012 to 2016.
Oh.
The other two novels, the first one started out to be a standalone novel, and then it ended up turning into a series.
Right.
And that's a weird story. I've retold it a couple times, but I'll tell it to you. Is I started writing my last novel, which is called Four. Just FOUR.
Right.
And I was talking to somebody when I was at an anthology conference in New Hampshire, which is no longer, but it was a bunch of writers getting together who write for anthologies.
Okay.
Gord Rowe, Gene O'Neill, F. Paul Wilson was there.
Oh, cool.
And anyways, we're all hanging out in that. And one gentleman who runs the Dark Discussions podcast, but is a good friend out of New Hampshire, Phil Perrin, said to me, "Hey, man, why don't you write a throwaway?" So I said, "Hey, that's a great idea." What a terrible idea that was. Because I focused off of the novel I was working on. I started on the throwaway, which was going to be a prequel, basically, but, just short. And when I finished the novella or novelette or whatever you wanted to call it, I went, this doesn't work. I have to write a novel. So I ended up writing these two books. I actually ended up turning the first novella into a novel, writing it published last July, which was called Highwayman. And then the sequel, which was actually the first book I was really writing, that just got published last February, around the end of February.
Okay.
And when I started doing this, I thought, wow, there's a lot of great characters in this. So what I can do is, hey, maybe I can go back and draw from the well and use this character or that character. So that's how that all came about. And of course, now I'm going to get back to your question. And the question was, how do you keep everything in order? I have absolutely no frigging idea. Thank God for my research assistant, because she's like my outline. I'll go back and say, how many people did we kill now? Oh, yeah. What was the name of this person? And that's just, there are many times when I started this series where I was going, oh boy, I should really be using some kind of a program or an outline. But like I said, I have a great research assistant. So that's my luck. If she leaves me, I may have to start outlining. Oh my God.
Okay. So then I'll have to, I'm going to press you a bit further on this. You've said this is a 4-book series. So how do you know it's 4 books?
No, my apologies. No, the fourth book that I've written is the second in the series, which is called the Highwayman series.
Right.
But the title of the fourth book is called Four.
Oh, okay.
FOU.
Okay. So these 2 books, Highwayman and Four, that's it for this particular story?
For this story, yeah. They're companion books. And the idea is the next book that I'm working on now has drawn characters from those first 2 books, but it's telling a completely different story.
Oh, okay. Okay. Sorry, my misunderstanding. I thought you had a 4-book series planned for the Highwayman. So I got you now.
Nope, that's all good.
So you're working on a new book, which is related to these 2 books, but not part of the same series.
No. No, they're all part. The series is called the Highwayman series. So the first book is self-titled Highwayman. The second book is called Four. It's book 2 in the Highwayman series. The third book I can't tell you the title of yet, but it'll be book 3 in the Highwayman series. Basically, the series is going to go until either I run out of steam or people tell me to get lost and write something else.
Okay.
I'm going to carry on with the series, but I'm not going to be exclusively to this. I've got a good juicy horror novel in the back of my head, which I think after I finish this book from the series, I'm going to go back and write a standalone horror novel again. So I'll be bouncing back and forth between these 2 genres, and that's the intention anyways, if everybody wants to keep reading it.
Okay. So let's get down to more of the business side of things for you then. Are you self-publishing?
No, I started out down that route. I self-published.
Okay.
I hate that term self-publishing, because you always think of the guy driving around with a box full of books in the back of his car.
Out in the parking lot. Hey, you want to buy a book? We're
indie now, which, look, I think that's pretty credible. I self-published, or I independently published my first novel, The Equinox, and my second novel, Acadia Event. And what happened is when I decided to write Highwayman, I thought, well, I should really maybe, go shop this around, because, you have limited success as an independent writer. You don't have the coverage, and a lot of times you got to go out of pocket, get yourself an editor and stuff like that.
Right.
So I submitted to actually what happened is that in my research for the Highwayman series, because I did an awful lot, I read a lot of true crime documentaries, looked over police reports, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
I hooked up with a guy that wrote a book on Ted Bundy, was actually 5 books on Ted Bundy. And I've read his first book, which was just, fascinating book to read, especially concerning the subject I was working on. And I sent him a message. And I said, listen, just let you know it was a great book. And he said, hey, you got a publisher? So I said, well, not yet. So I went old school and I submitted to WildBlue Press, which is predominantly a true crime publisher, but they do have fiction as well. They have, oh boy, I don't want to throw names out and then I'm going to screw up a name. But anyways, they have New York Times bestselling authors on their docket. They still consider themselves a small press, but they got a lot of heavy hitters in their docket. And I thought, well, what the hell? We'll submit it there. And they took a while to get back to me, but they came back and they said, yes, we want this Highwayman book. We want its follow-up, and we want to take your other 2 books back into the fold, the Katie Event and the Equinox. So all my books are underneath the umbrella of WildBlue Press now.
Okay. And where are they based from?
Colorado.
Okay. So that means that you have like an editor that you have a working relationship with? Yes,
I've worked with 2 different editors as a matter.
Okay.
And both were great. The second editor worked with me on the Highwayman books, and she kicked my butt pretty good. So, and that's a sign of a good editor. And so, yeah, WildBlue basically runs all of their books through 3 stages of editing. So it doesn't just happen in one shot. So, and then we got run through for plot holes and all that stuff. So yeah, they're great so far. I'm very happy with them. They got like I say, they got a lot of books out there. They're very popular.
Okay, cool.
I just want to be one of their popular guys.
Absolutely. And since they're US based and this is, I think just a tip for anyone that wants to become a writer, when you're writing your books, you're using American spellings, I assume, right?
Yeah, I am. Yeah, I mean, if you that's the biggest market that you're facing, right? Or you're trying to break into. So yeah, that's the way I went. Yeah, I just completely abandoned my whole Canadian identity and just abandoned the Canadian English language. Yeah.
Yeah. I've gone through the same exercise, and that was kind of frustrating at first. But then you realize, oh, that's just the reality and the economics of the situation. So
certainly,
you have to do it. What about foreign distribution for you? Does your publisher do that for you too? Or?
Oh yeah, the books that's what kind of blew me away. Is the books are available all over the world now. I mean, I'm seeing down in South America, in Venezuela, all of a sudden there's my book. I'm like, wow, a lot of people read English because they're not. I don't think they're not translated. But the one good thing that I got getting under the umbrella of a publisher was now my stuff's gone to audiobook as well, and that's a huge market as well. And so that's
right.
And it's kind of cool, if you get the right narrator. And the guy that we've got for the Highwayman books, his name is R.L. Keck, and I'm just tickled pink. He's done both books.
Okay.
And as long as I'm going to be doing these books, I hope that he'll be the narrator for it. But it's good. You get somebody that you're really happy with. It's also very weird to listen to somebody else read your work.
Yeah. And it is amazing. And I was caught by surprise myself looking at the recent statistics, but audiobooks actually comprise the majority of book sales for a lot of writers, which blew my mind.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. Well, so many people are on the road now.
Yeah.
And that's what happened with me is especially when I did the ice road trucking gig, we were running 16, 17-hour days working, right? Because there's a window you got to get up there and get this stuff up to them.
Right.
So when do you find time to read a book? Because as soon as I put a book in my hand, clunk, I'm out sleeping.
Yeah.
Right? So audiobooks are pretty great for that. I know a lot of truckers do it. I know a lot of people that do traveling and stuff, or even on an airplane can make that a lot more pleasurable than just listening to like they're watching a movie.
A little bit of a tangent here, but I have to ask, since you've mentioned ice trucking a couple of times, because my only exposure to that is through that reality show.
Yeah,
is it anything like that, or is that like a heightened version of what typical day for you would be?
Well, look, I first of all, I wasn't on the show. I know a couple of the guys from the show.
Oh, okay.
or I've met. Sorry, I don't hang out with them, but I've met them. It's reality television, so they've got to pump up the drama a little bit, especially if you're going to have interactions between people. But it's the ice road really was a very, very cool place. I learned stuff. There was when I initially went up there, I was white knuckle driving up a trail called the Ingram Trail, which was basically around 70 kilometers of just winding icy road to get you up to the ice roads.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, other than that, it's I don't like reality shows.
Yeah, yeah.
I'd rather watch something about that in a documentary, but I'm not going to debunk them either.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Is that anything in that experience for you? You think that's going to work its way into your writing, or has it already? Or
well, it did. Yeah, my second novel, Acadia Event. See, I wrote Equinox, and then a buddy of mine. I was getting ready to hang up my skates, trucking all together. And a buddy of mine said, "Hey, you got to come out and run the ice."
mm-hmm.
And I said, "Okay." So I went out there. I had no idea if I was going to write a second novel or anything. And then all of a sudden, I got up there. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
if you've ever been to the north, and I mean, you're almost in the Arctic, right? You're like a couple hundred kilometers from the Arctic.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very inspiring atmosphere, or
vista.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so, wham. Yeah, this would be a great place for an alien invasion. so I came back down, and I wrote a story and my first two books were both based in Canada. The first one was in the Manitoba region. The second one starts in the Hamilton Escarpment, and it ends up on the ice roads. But they really appealed to a lot of American readers too.
Right.
I mean, I don't know if there's so much saying, do they know where Brandon, Manitoba is?
Mm-hmm.
However, it's prairies, right?
Yeah.
So it's universal, goes across. So
cool.
But yeah, it was a lot of fun, very inspiring, and I had a lot of. It's probably the biggest book I wrote to date. I think it's like 700 pages or something like that, or 600 pages.
Wow. Okay. All right. So let's focus on your Highwayman series a bit more. Can you do a bit of a deeper dive into what this is all about and who the main characters are?
Sure. Okay. The main. Now, this is a tough one. I'll lay it out like this.
Okay.
The main character, because it says on the first book, meet Lance Belanger, he has one ambition to be the most prolific serial killer or killer of all time.
Mm-hmm.
He wants to be. So the first book really does follow the serial killer and where he does his first fledgling kill when he's about 19 years old. And then it follows him over the course of almost 8 years as he improves his craft. Now, meanwhile, there are FBI lawmen all over the place, but FBI in particular is tracking him because he ends up being on the FBI's most wanted list. And that's his aim. He wants to do that.
Okay.
However, the first book is very focused on him, and it's kind of a slow burn, and it gets you to understand how he evolves and becomes as good as what he does.
Mm-hmm.
The second book is more about the chase down,
okay,
where they're going after him. So it's a faster read.
Sure.
So my characters are Lance Belanger, and he is the highwayman.
Okay.
One of the investigators following him is named Lewis Ash. He's an FBI special agent, and he's in the first book. Because this takes place over the course of 8 years, and realistically, people retire, people die, whatever. Mm-hmm. Another investigator comes in after him, and his name is Dave Maxwell, and everybody calls him Max.
Okay.
And so the second book is focused more on Maxwell, his perspective. So you get the serial killer perspective in the first book, and then you're getting the FBI perspective in the second book.
Okay, that's cool. Because most murder thriller series are always usually from the focus of the detective. So you've flipped it around, which is interesting. Yes,
and the other thing about the way these books were written is they're almost written with a true crime feel. So mm-hmm. everything's dated, every highway, everything was very well researched. And as you mentioned earlier about doing a series, did you not outline or anything like that? And that was one of the things. But the other thing about this is that all of these highways that I mentioned in these two books, I've been on them.
Okay.
I drove as a long haul trucker for 20 years.
Oh, okay.
So, but I will warn you that I have an alibi for every location. But yeah, and so that was good. That made it easier to go back and revisit a lot of these places, because basically when you're writing, you're using Google Maps now. You got to go back and look and say, okay, am I going to be in this area? But I had the opportunity to go to all of these places. So that was just great to use those as backdrops.
Sure.
For the story.
Yeah, that's really cool. So you're working on the third book in this series. I don't know if that's going to be spoiler question. Can I ask, is Lance still around, or you can't say at this time?
How about we answer it this way? Lance Belanger is not in the next story.
Okay. All right.
So, yeah, I mean, look, that's the first two books are basically the Lance Belanger case file.
Okay.
And so the next book is going to include Dave Maxwell, mm-hmm. but it's a completely different case. But also the thing is, with these first two books, there were so many tendrils that just filtered out, and you go, okay, well, where do I go with this story or that story? Well, in the process of this story, we met a crime family in Bucharest who dealt in snuff and what's the word I'm looking for? Human trafficking, stuff like that.
Right.
Well, Lance gets mixed up with these guys too.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that story, which is we're looking at going off into. And just the idea is with every book I'm going to write,
mm-hmm.
depending on how many books I write, at the end of the last book, which was 4, I teased the next book.
Right.
So I actually wrote a chapter in for the next book to carry on.
Right.
And the idea, like I said, is a completely different case,
mm-hmm.
which I'm working now. But there are so many interesting different characters in these first 2 books to draw from. That's why I said, okay,
mm-hmm.
we could probably make a series out of this. But I don't want it just to be on one character.
Okay.
For instance, like John Sanford has Lucas Davenport in his Prey series. That's a fantastic, I think he's done 30 books on that.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't want to just focus on one character like that.
Okay, that's interesting because the common wisdom these days is that for success, most writers should write a series. And you seem to be trying to put your own twist on that.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Well, I just don't want to become bored with the writing.
Yeah.
And I think my fear is that if you stay with the same character and the same set of events,
mm-hmm.
it will become formulaic.
Sure.
And I don't want to do that. So
okay, I get you. And because the serial killer genre or subgenre is one that's explored quite a bit in the last 10, 15 years, I guess, like going back to say like Silence of the Lambs, which probably blew the lid off that genre, made it, I mean, real life serial killers have always fascinated a certain part of the audience for sure. But do you find it difficult to bring fresh takes on it to this type of story, or?
Well, what I wanted to avoid is to have, and what I've seen in the past, which, you tire up very simply, is probably, I'm thinking of another serial killer story would be Seven.
Right.
The 7 Deadly Sins.
Right.
And that was a very, very cool idea on its own, but it was followed by a lot of stories after that where,
yeah,
the serial killer had to do something that was so completely outlandish that everybody was going to focus on it because he was quoting Poe or whatever.
Right.
And I wanted to stay away from that. And really, I think the difference between my characters and what you're seeing in today's trends,
mm-hmm.
and I'm not knocking anybody, is that I wanted the serial killer to be as unsavory as possible,
right.
because that's the way these people really are.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't want anybody to like him. And that's what we saw. Even with Silence of the Lambs, if we look at Hannibal Lecter, and I mean, look, Thomas Harris is a genius. It was a great book.
Mm-hmm.
But when we look at Hannibal Lecter, we like him.
Yeah.
Even though he ate a woman's tongue, but we still like him because he's a charming, cool guy,
Yeah.
and he's cultured and he likes music. And he likes to read and he paints.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he's funny. But the fact of the matter is that most of these people in real life are despicable,
mm-hmm.
horrible human beings, maybe with the exception of Ed Kemper, who's very likable.
Mm-hmm.
But if I don't know if you know who Ed Kemper is or not, he was a killer in California, and he's kind of the guy that first hooked up with the FBI and started profiling and all that.
Right.
At any rate, so I don't want anybody to like them. I'm not trying to, and I'm not pissing on other writers. I'm just saying that I wanted to buck that trend because we've seen Dexter, we've seen
mm-hmm.
the Cleaver boy there in I Am Not a Serial Killer.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to do that. I wanted something very realistic, and some of it is really go for the throat stuff in these 2 books. Mm-hmm. But it also makes you understand that these are really, really bad people. And I think of them as the most horrific monsters out there because they're real.
Right.
And they move among society,
mm-hmm.
and they're predatory. So
yeah,
that's the way I've looked at it. The other thing is I don't know if this series is going to be all serial killer. I have a really heart-pounding just action thing going on where some shoot 'em up stuff. I'm not saying that bank robbery can't be in the series.
Okay, cool.
Or anything like that. So I want to keep it open, but also that's why I'm going to jump off to my horror novel to keep fresh too.
Sure.
I don't want to stay on one thing too long.
Mm-hmm.
So
can you talk about what your horror novel's about at all, or?
No, I'm going to keep that. I'm going to keep that one close to my chest right now, because especially if I never write it. Oh my god!
Yeah, you don't want to have a commitment somewhere. That's for sure. Okay, is there anything else that you wanted to mention that hasn't come up in the door over the course of this interview?
No, just listen. People come. Look, I write books because I want people to read them.
Mm-hmm.
Come check me out.
All right.
Is this plug time?
Sure.
Should I get plug
away.
Yeah. come check me up at mjpreston.net, all lowercase, or you can go to the WildBlue Press website. You can get me on Facebook. I'm a very open person. If people want to contact me, I love interacting with readers, as long as you're not a 20-year-old girl in 19 different stages of undress. Because I will check out your Facebook page if you send me a friend request. Right. But yeah, just check me out, Twitter, Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn, but particularly if you want to check out my work, check me out at mjpreston.net or on Amazon.
Okay, very cool. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to do this interview with me.
Well, I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wish you the best of luck with all your future projects.
Well, thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you. And to all the listeners out there, as always, stay safe, but stay scared.